Welcome to the English Epics channel. My friends and family used to call me Elephant. Do you think it's because I'm big? Not at all. I'm of average height and weight, 178 centimeters and 77 kilograms. No, they called me Elephant because I have an extraordinary ability to remember practically everything. My name is Peter Marchand, and I am a natural anomaly. I'm not great at math, but ask me what our family's phone number was in 1982 at Camp Grayling, and I'll tell you. It's not that difficult, considering I was an Army kid and we moved every 2 or 3 years. I can also give you the exact address, house number, street name, and zip code. My teenage years could be summed up with a single question. Peter, what's Aunt Marge's new phone number? I swear my parents, as well as my siblings, must have saved thousands of dollars by not buying pencils and paper to write down numbers. They just asked me whenever I was around. It was useful for them and they appreciated it. What they didn't like, however, was that I remembered everything they said, even from 2 or 3 years ago. For older events, I couldn't recall the exact wording, but I still remembered the essence of the conversation. I told you we're going to the McGregor's party. Peter, didn't I mention the McGregor's party to your mom? Yes, Dad. You told her last Saturday during the hockey game in the second period. But Mom, you didn't know for sure if you could all go and said, I'll check if we can find a babysitter and call you back. Guess who didn't get hugged by either Mom or Dad that evening? I was used for their convenience throughout my childhood. By my teenage years, I realized it would be better for me to keep this ability to myself. It was too late with my family. But at least with new friends, every time we moved again and again, I had a chance to start fresh. I made it a rule to ask my friends things like, what's the date? Or, are they playing the Jets on Saturday or Sunday? Just to seem like a normal, forgetful person, however, I still used my ability to remember everything. In 12th grade, during a career counseling session with the school advisor, I asked what professions would be the most lucrative. When I had to choose between being the head of a mafia family in New Jersey, an arms dealer in Colorado, a plastic surgeon in Hollywood, or a criminal lawyer anywhere in the world, I picked the least repugnant option. I became a lawyer. Not the flashiest one, but the kind who remembers every law and every court ruling he's ever read or heard about. I'm not a widely advertised criminal defense lawyer. I'm just a tax attorney who deals with incomes and expenses and knows every way to reduce the tax burden for all hard-working citizens, including the wealthiest, the head of a mafia family in New Jersey, an arms dealer in Colorado, and many plastic surgeons in Hollywood. I know all the loopholes, and if I had the chance, I could probably know all the fake boobs happily bouncing around Los Angeles. Is everyone keeping up? Good. Here's the continuation of the story. Shortly after finishing law school, I met Annabelle, an MBA student 2 years older than me. She was sharp, sweet, and incredibly outgoing. She was a magnet for a boring, average-looking, modest guy like me. They say opposites attract, and that's exactly what happened with us. While dating me, she was also seeing others and didn't hide it. She even joked about the excuses she came up with when she wasn't available, visits to friends, family obligations, group projects. Over the next 6 months of knowing her, she did an incredible job pulling me out of my shell. I still looked average, but I left behind all the insecurities I had developed during my childhood. I even became a fun guy. It's easy when you remember every joke you've ever heard and can time them perfectly to actually make people laugh. As a result, we grew very attached to each other. I was attached enough to Annabelle to ask if she wanted to date me exclusively. She thought about it for a few days and then agreed to the new terms of our relationship. I officially became her boyfriend. This lasted for 6 months and 10 days. Since September of that year, Annabelle's sister had been planning a ski trip to British Columbia from January 15th to the 17th. One day, Annabelle let it slip that she was planning to visit her sister that same weekend. I let her go, following the principle that some people, if given enough rope, will hang themselves. And that's exactly what she did. Annabelle called me the following Monday. "How was your weekend?" I asked. "Wonderful," she replied. We spent the whole weekend shopping and catching up on sisterly things, you know. And how's the skiing in Whistler? Everything good? I asked. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. Why would I know anything about that? Well, if she had paid attention to what her sister had been saying over the past few months. How do I know? Your sister was skiing in Whistler that weekend. That's how, I replied dryly. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Oh, crap. I forgot, she finally said. Then go ahead and forget my phone number too, I said, and hung up. That's all there was to it. I had heard plenty of stories about people getting tangled up in their own lies, and Annabelle messed up from the very beginning. The next week, I received a letter from Annabelle. In it, she apologized and explained that she wasn't ready for an exclusive relationship at her age and shouldn't have misled me. I threw the letter in the trash. The following 2 years were spent mostly focused on my new job at a local law firm. I went on a few dates, but nothing serious. First, I was working hard to prove myself, which didn't leave much time to establish a foundation for a meaningful relationship. Second, the episode with Annabelle made me cautious about getting emotionally involved. So, for 2 years, I mostly sought pleasant female companionship, nothing more. One day, I was assigned to a new client who required legal advice on preparing a tax return related to some investments made during the last fiscal year. I was supposed to meet with the CEO and the Vice President of Finance. When I was shown into the conference room, a familiar face was seated at the table, Annabelle. The meeting went smoothly, and in the end, I secured a very satisfied new client. When the meeting concluded, Annabelle approached me. "Hello, stranger. It's nice to see you," Annabelle said. "Hello, Annabelle," I replied simply, focusing on the delicate task of putting my papers back into my briefcase. "Hey, it's almost lunchtime. How about we grab some lunch and catch up a little?" she said cheerfully. I didn't want to, but at the same time I was curious, and she was still very charming. Did we have lunch? Of course. But right after lunch, we ended up in Annabelle's apartment for some serious, adult fun. Bad memories are unpleasant, but good sex is always good. And that's how Annabelle and I reconnected. As two professionals at that time, she wasn't in a relationship with anyone, and I was still single. We started seeing each other again for the next 2 years. I had no idea that Annabelle was still as unfaithful as she had been before. I let it all go, forgetting such a strange concept for me about the past and leaving it behind. Soon we got married. We lived happily for 63 months, 2 weeks and 6 days. We had a lot in common, but I still didn't reveal my ability to remember everything. Apparently, I still wasn't fully confident in Annabelle, and continued to keep that secret. In the last 2 months, Annabelle started staying late at work more frequently, justifying it with visits to friends, urgent errands, or pressing work deadlines. These excuses seemed all too familiar, as they were the same ones she used years ago when she was deceiving me. But they could have been true, and I decided to let it slide. One day, I had to leave town for a couple of days to meet with an accounting firm conducting an independent audit for one of my clients who was in the process of selling their company. Returning home on Friday evening, Annabelle and I made love. She was a tigress in bed. Shortly after, I got up and went to the bathroom adjoining the bedroom. Annabelle never uses that bathroom because the mirror is small and the lighting is poor. The toilet seat was up. I clearly remembered the last time I used it. I had lowered the seat right before brushing my teeth. Now it was up, and there was a faint yellow stain on the rim that hadn't been there last week. I've said before that I'm not the smartest guy around, but even I have my limits. Some man had used that toilet to relieve himself in the past week. The only door to the bathroom is in the master bedroom, which means he must have been in there. Recalling Annabelle's past behavior and her recent string of suspiciously late returns home, I had a sinking feeling that she was cheating on me. I just had to find out. I had 2 options. Either wait and catch her in an obvious lie, or take matters into my own hands and uncover the harsh truth. I chose the latter because it was likely to yield faster results. The weekend was agonizing. I didn't feel very loving or caring, while Annabelle was the complete opposite. If it worked for my mom, it would work for me. I feigned a splitting headache all weekend. I played the role so well that Annabelle insisted I see a doctor on Monday. On Monday morning, I visited a few specialists, but not medical ones. First, I spoke with a colleague who handled divorce cases, and then I met with a private investigator who could find out for sure if Annabelle was cheating. By the end of the day, Herb, the private detective, had our house wired with audio and video surveillance. All I had to do was give Annabelle enough rope to hang herself. Well, it had worked once before. Using the headache excuse, I told Annabelle I needed to leave for a couple of days to see a top-notch neurologist recommended by my doctor. Despite my suspicions, I felt uneasy about how much care she showed for my supposedly poor health. I had to convince her that there was no point in coming with me. She kept insisting that I needed her support, but she eventually dropped the idea. She was so worried that I almost believed I was wrong to suspect her of cheating. How could my wife show so much love and care while at the same time lying and betraying me? It just didn't make sense. However, there was no turning back unless I wanted to admit to my own lie. So, on Thursday morning, she drove me to the airport. Then I quickly returned to the city and checked into a downtown hotel. The more I thought about Annabelle's behavior over the past few days, the more I became convinced I had wasted my money. As promised, I called her on Thursday evening. She showed genuine concern as I vaguely described all the tests I had undergone that day and the ones I was supposed to have the next. Her sincere care and the love pouring through the phone made me feel absolutely terrible. By the end of the call, her emotions had overwhelmed her so much that she could barely speak, choking back tears. What a damned fool I was. That night, I had trouble falling asleep, consumed by guilt and regret. I was such an idiot to forget how deeply Annabelle loved me. I was now certain that my suspicions were baseless. The next morning, a phone call from Herb proved me wrong. Minutes later, I was sitting in Herb's office, watching the footage recorded the previous evening. The video was slightly grainy, but the entryway, dining room, and living room where I assumed our TV was located were clearly visible. A faint noise caught my attention. Herb adjusted the volume, and the sound of keys unlocking the door became loud and distinct. The door opened, and Annabelle appeared, about to enter our security code into the alarm system. Then a second person stepped into the doorway. Damn it. It was Brad Schwartz, a colleague of Annabelle's whom I'd met a few times at various company events. Tall and, I had to admit, better looking than me, Brad was married and had 2 young preschool-aged children. As soon as the door closed, he grabbed Annabelle and tried to kiss her. She gently pushed him away at first, but then collapsed into his arms and returned his kiss. This wasn't the hesitant kiss of 2 beginners. It was a long and passionate kiss shared by longtime lovers. With one hand, he caressed her lower back, pulling her closer, while the other gently explored her curves. Slowly, without breaking their kiss, they moved toward the living room. I wanted to shout my disgust and anger at the screen. Soon, Brad guided Annabelle onto the couch, positioning himself over her. Her blouse fell open, revealing more than she likely intended. Brad then knelt in front of the couch and began helping Annabelle out of her undergarments. She lifted her hips slightly and brought her legs together to make it easier for him. Then, with a playful smile, she opened her legs, placing her feet on the edge of the couch. He leaned in between her thighs, his actions deliberate and unhurried. First, he kissed her gently, then deepened his touch, savoring her reactions. Oh, Brad. This feels so wrong and so good at the same time, Annabelle murmured, gripping his hair as if holding on to the moment itself. It wasn't long before Annabelle, experienced a silent but unmistakable release. As her husband, I knew the signs all too well. She helped Brad to his feet and began undoing his belt and the zipper of his trousers. Before long, he was standing before her, and she responded with the kind of passion I, too, had experienced many times before. "I'm close, baby," Brad said. Annabelle paused, turned around, and presented herself to him in a way that left nothing to the imagination. "I want it like this," she said softly. "Wow, you're so tight." "After 2 kids, having my wife is like walking into the Lincoln Tunnel," Brad said, clearly in a poetic mood. He started moving faster, and I realized he was about to peak. At that very moment, the phone rang. I looked around the private detective's office until I realized the sound was coming from the video. While Brad was still having her, Annabelle picked up the phone and looked at the display. Without saying a word, she pulled away from Brad and sat upright on the couch. "Hi, darling, how are you? How are you feeling?" That's when I realized I was watching the other end of my phone conversation from the previous evening. Just out of curiosity, I started repeating my version of the conversation for Herb. Well, to be honest, not great. I still have a headache. And because of all the tests I had today, I'm completely exhausted, I replied. Brad stepped closer to her, pointing his tool at her face. Annabelle pushed him away but didn't let him go. She began to stroke him gently. "You poor thing. I wish I could be there with you. I shouldn't have let you talk me out of coming with you," she said, continuing to stroke Brad, who was now savoring her chest. "What tests did you have to take?" she asked. "Too many to talk about, sweetheart. Too many, and there will be even more, tomorrow." I lied. "Did the doctor say anything about what might be causing the headaches?" "Any hints?" she asked, her face showing concern barely visible behind Brad's persistent attempts to get closer to her lips. "Well, he's not sure. He said he prefers to run all the tests before giving his opinion. But it could be something minor or something more serious," I said, avoiding a direct answer. She began, but Brad interrupted her with a forceful move. She pushed him back, slightly. Again, he tried to take the lead. Annabelle finally managed to push him away completely. "I'm so worried about you, darling." She murmured before being interrupted once more. Managing to create a little distance, she finally mumbled, "I love you. I love you too," I replied, remembering how I had hung up the phone when guilt had overwhelmed me at the hotel. She dropped the phone to the floor, grabbed Brad by the shoulders, and quickly gave in to his advances. Moments later, she composed. Herself and her actions left no trace of hesitation. I stood up, ready to leave. I had seen enough and didn't want to witness anything more. And to think, I believed she was overwhelmed with emotion. Yeah, right on. Herb asked me to sit down and watch another video. From the darkness visible through the bedroom window, I realized it was late evening and, judging by the timing, the lovers had been at it for hours after my phone call. Brad and Annabelle were in bed. The view of the bed was from above, likely from a camera hidden in the smoke detector. Annabelle was straddling Brad in an energetic motion. I know some men enjoy watching someone else with their wife, but not me. I was devastated. "Listen," Herb said. Annabelle's voice was barely audible. "I already told you, Brad. This is the last time. It should never have come to this." "It was a huge mistake," Annabelle said, moving rhythmically, clearly trying to quicken his release. "There are many things I could call what we've done, but a mistake isn't one of them," Brad replied. "It feels too good to stop." "Brad?" "I've made up my mind," she said, increasing her pace. "I used to feel guilty about betraying Peter, but now, realizing I might lose him, I understand how much I love him, how much he means to me." As he reached for her, she leaned into his touch, allowing him to savor the moment. At this point, Brad let out a moan as he reached his peak. Annabelle lowered herself even further, trying to take him whole, and kissed him tenderly, continuing to move, to give him maximum pleasure. She remained close to him for a moment before finally moving away and sitting cross-legged on the bed beside him, facing the camera, her posture leaving little to the imagination. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. "I'm scared he's going to die, Brad. He's never been this sick before, and all these tests. Oh, Brad. I love him so much." The tears flowed even more freely. Under different circumstances, those tears might have moved me. Her pain felt genuine. The problem was that those same tears mixed with the remnants of what had just transpired, between them making the scene even more unbearable. I stood up again and headed for the door. "Won't you give her another chance, man?" Herb asked. "She really loves you." "Dude, I'd give anything to have a wife who loves me that much. Can't you forgive her?" he added. "I can't forgive her for one simple reason," I said. "I will never be able to forget. Thank you for listening until the end. See you in the next episode of English Epics. Take care of yourself and your loved ones. Goodbye."